is that very different? You feel the same way when you're in the orchestra as well, don't you?
Well,
Or not all, not as much.
it's all in degrees.
Right.
Because, of course, in an orchestra, you have to be working constantly for that same relationship, and it's less precise because there's more wild cards. There's 80 wild cards in the
Right,
room rather than the
right.
3 in your trio. But it's still what you're trying to do. Within large stuff like an orchestra or major chamber music, you're also more focused on the composition and the piece of music
Right.
and that deep thing. Whereas within a lot of this other chamber music, you're focused on the performance, you're focused on the way it's relating to the audience. If you're playing a Brahms chamber piece, you probably shouldn't be thinking about the audience because your brain is way too full thinking of what you have to think about. But the beauty of shows with kids or any of the audience engagement things I've done in my life is that you are being very aware of the audience, and therefore you're extending your sense of ensemble that you have with your fellow players to
Right.
the audience too, and you're
Exactly.
trying to create ensemble with the audience. Ensemble, the word meaning together.
And ensemble with other people in the musical community that you interview, and ensemble with all the guests that you interview, and
Sure.
your fans that listen to you report the weather in such an honest way. They have told me. You feel this sort of thing with everybody, don't you?
Mm.
Or
Well, first there's interviewing.
Yeah.
I've described interviewing as dancing. And even though I'm not a great dancer or greatly engaged in dancing, I've done enough to know what dancing feels like. And an interview is great that way because suddenly it's like you're going to a dance where you don't know anybody and there's somebody and you go ask them to dance and then you dance with them because that's how interviews are. You've met somebody for 10 minutes tops, and then you immediately try to sense the motion and are they going to move to the left? Are you going to move to the left with them? Or are you going to resist and pull the other way? And so there's a wonderful dance in an interview. Being on the radio is different. Simply talking to a microphone, as you do. For me, the real interest there is to keep loving language and keep trying to use language in such a way that if somebody's listened to me for 20 years, they're not going to predict the next word I'm going to say. I'm going to keep my mind going by trying to think of different ways to express things. So that's a completely different part of me.
Well, that's a very interesting part because I read that how you got the job at the radio station. You just kind of walked in and said, I have some suggestions for you. I guess I have two-part question. You were already talking about music quite a bit in those days. That's what I had read.
Sure, I did a lot of. I early on found that if you have an audience sitting there a little ill at ease,
Right.
the trick is to find something that I've certainly encountered in your concerts too, that to find just that one thing that will do two things. It will A, loosen them up,
Right.
so they lose some apprehension, and B, it will give them one thing to think about so that they'll have a starting point for listening to the piece of music. Then you hope they'll forget what you said, and then the piece of music will take over.
So you were talking before your concerts.
Oh,
a little
yeah,
bit to
yeah.
the
No,
audience,
I'd done
yeah.
that for a long time. Well, yeah, my children's concert creation predates my radio work by
I
20
see.
years.
I see. So I guess the next part of my question is, you walked in to make some suggestions. You moved sort of up in rank into now the program director. Have you made those changes that you wanted to when you were listening to the radio and said, I got to go in and tell them,
Well, I've been allowed to to express what I wanted to do. The exact story is really arcane, but I'll tell it.
please do.
That's it. Elliott Carter wrote a woodwind quintet, and Elliott Carter is really famous for putting 4 markings over every note, a dot and a dash and an accent and a slur, all in the same note, and you wonder what all of these marks that are way too tedious and fussy mean. And we were going through his woodwind quintet, and then we hit on the idea that if we'd forget all that, put down our instruments and scat sing it.
Oh.
All of a sudden, it made complete sense.
Wow.
So our quintet did that. That was when I was with the quintet at WSU. The
Did you
Solstice
record it?
Quintet. We never
Oh,
did, and I'm
man, that
so
would've been
sorry.
great.
So I was trying to get a project going that we would record the scat singing version of it
Right.
and then play it so that people could hear that happen and really see when you get past the stuff that freezes classical musicians of worrying way too much about the wrong things instead of finding what the music is about. And at that moment, we had in one way found what the music was about, and I wanted to bring that to radio. And while
Oh.
I've never brought that exact project, I think I've certainly tried to do that feeling of, it's always looking for the key, unlocking the door, the one little thing that will change your way of perception so that the music will be different.
That's interesting because I was just reading about the horn and its origins and how it was kind of used as an extension of the human voice because for great distances. So the hunting call or that you're talking to somebody across the Alps or something like that, and that's exactly what you did. It was just went backwards and put it back into human voice.
Sure.
Yeah.
And, well, there's a reason I'm married to a singer.
I want to ask you about that later on, but I'm just going to continue with this line of questioning about KPBX. What's your proudest thing that you've done here at KPBX? I mean, is there something that you're going to be looking back after retirement saying, at least I did that, or is there something like
one
that? Or?
Is maintaining classical music here, because when public radio was founded in the 1970s, and they had 1 hour a day of news program and had to fill the other 23 hours a day, because of the people who created it, it was dominated by art music, generally classical music or jazz or folk music and things like that. And then over the 40, 50 years of public radio's change, it's moved more and more into a word-based medium and gone away from music, and classical music is no longer the universal filler. Also, classical music, however you feel about it, is no longer the common language of the large audience of public radio.
Right.
So it's always a question that by maintaining a strong core of classical music on public radio, are we burying our heads in the sand? Are we needlessly freezing ourselves and not moving forward? Are we just living in the past? Or is there something so important and wonderful in that art that we need to do everything we can to keep it going? And so if by using whatever abilities I have, I've been able to have a lot of people be glad enough to turn on the radio, and even if I'm not a classical music fan, stay around and, hey, that's kind of neat, and learn and listen and be close to it, then I'm really glad that it still seems stable and potent as of 2015.